Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dustbin, yet another feature to my rapidly expanding repertoire. What is the Dustbin? Well, I was going back through my favorites over on FimFiction the other day, as I often do when I'm bored or sick of being bored, and I noticed that there were quite a few excellent, wonderful, amazing, beautiful stories that had never been finished. And when I say never been finished, I mean that the authors don't appear to be working on them anymore. Like, the stories haven't been touched in about 6+ months. Not that I would know anything about that. It's a real shame and happens more often than I would like. As such, I've taken it upon myself to look at these stories, these unfinished marvels that deserve at least a little bit of attention. Who knows, maybe it will reignite the writer's interest in the story and maybe they'll continue on with it. Though for some of these, I doubt that'll be the case. To qualify for being part of the Dustbin, a story must be unfinished and must not have been updated for at least 12 straight months. Yes, some authors do update on a very, very slow schedule, but I'll consider any story that's gone for at least that stretch of time, regardless of if it's updated the day after I post the video or not. So, yeah, let's get started. The first story for this inaugural episode is Trixie at the Royal Wedding, written by Mooncalf. Currently only one chapter long, though it is a very hefty chapter. It hasn't been touched since December of 2013, a little over a year ago. The premise of the story is pretty amusing in and of itself. Trixie gets an invite to a royal wedding. She doesn't know why, but she's game. Maybe she's there as the entertainment, perhaps? Well, after a very long build-up, we learn that it was a mock wedding for Trixie and Twilight, who apparently have some sort of feelings for one another. It's not exactly made clear in the first chapter, aside from the fact that they do harbor some form of romantic feelings for each other. Twilight's friends were the ones who set up the whole thing, for funsies, basically. But uh-oh, it turns out Pinkie Pie is a legally ordained minister. So as it turns out, when the two of them walked down the aisle together, and they both agreed to do it, once again, for funsies, the vows were legal and binding, so for all intents and purposes, Twilight and Trixie are now happily married. And that's where the first chapter ends. There's some setup for shenanigans down the road, but it looks like they won't be seen in this story. It's unfortunate because, if nothing else, the story manages to nail the feeling of a situational comedy very well. At times, a little too well, as some of the jokes are telegraphed a long ways away, and the author just loves to fit in as much as they can into every single scene. This unfortunately leads to a bit of purple prose at times, which would account for why the first chapter is so tubby. Close to 11,000 words make up this singular chapter, so there is a lot to get through, and almost all of it is leading up to the reveal at the end that Pinkie accidentally married Trixie and Twilight. Married the two together, not married both of them herself. That short plot summary that I gave you going into this thing doesn't account for most of the writing in the story, and it's evident right from the first paragraph, which gives us a brief diatribe about the nature of boredom before introducing us to Trixie, and then giving us a huge explanation on who Trixie is and what she does and what motivates her. This is something that persists into almost every single scene, and there is a copious amount of telling instead of showing in this entire story. To its credit, it does get a bit better about it as the chapter goes on, but it's still a bit of a slog to get there. Almost every scene could be trimmed down, shortened, tightened, and just generally have a hacksaw taken to it. Even so, that doesn't change the fact that there is a very amusing premise underneath it all, and it manages to shine through in the end. It's a good story with an amusing setup, with plenty of possibilities for comedy and romance down the line. But, if this story were to be continued, it would have to have a lot of fat trimmed from it. Purple prose tends to be a problem amongst fanfiction writers in general, and it is very much in effect here. If future chapters could be trimmed down, and perhaps the first one gone over by an editor with an eye for trimming the fat, this could be a great little Twixie story with plenty of room for comedy and romance. So the ultimate question to be asked here on the Dustbin is, should the story be continued or not? The answer for this one is a tentative yes. There is a lot of room for improvement here, but as I've said, the premise is solid and entertaining, if not wholly original. I'd love to see more of this with a more concise beginning and more of a focus specifically on how Trixie and Twilight try to deal with their accidental marriage as best that they can. And so ends our first episode of the Dustbin. Kind of short, I know, but that's basically what happens when I'm working with unfinished material. I can speculate on what could have been all I want, but the main purpose here is to look at what's there, what could be improved, and where it could go should the story be revived. And ultimately, whether or not the story should be continued. And this one, while there is little of it to be seen, has the potential to be really good. I wouldn't mind seeing more of it. So thanks for tuning in to the first episode of my new little segment. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to let me know in the comments, and feel free to direct me to other unfinished stories in the comments below, and I'll give them a look. Thanks a bunch, and I'll see you all later.